Hello, you're watching Initiative Africa. My name is Asha Sampath. Welcome to your weekly magazine featuring Africa on the move through smart innovations and initiatives that work. This week, we have chosen to follow children with disabilities and their parents in their everyday lives. How can we better help them? We will discuss this in a few minutes with our guest Sandra, Senou. But first, here are the top stories of our show. She's a mother of 3 children, including Alexandre, a 13-year-old with a physical disability. Sandra Senou wanted to break the isolation and the taboos that often surround families with disabled children. She achieved this by writing books, creating podcasts, and founding an association. She is our guest today.
So if a child is found to be different, we don't know what's wrong. Parents are at a loss. So the aim of the association was really to provide parents with a place where they can be listened to, where they can be supported.
Breaking the taboo of disability and succeeding at school is the dream of a young autistic person supported by his family, a role model to follow.
I work with Franck every day, talking to him, doing exercises with him, showing him all the affection in the world, and making sure he knows that he is the best.
A free ambulance service for the underprivileged and victims of attacks in Mogadishu, the Somali doctor has realized a unique project to help his compatriots.
We started this service in 2006, and actually by the time it was in need, many people was dying and getting injury inside the Bakara market or any other village in Mogadishu.
Often poorly diagnosed troubles and disabilities are misunderstood by society. In many countries, autistic children are still seldom and sometimes not at all supported by the educational system. This is how in Cameroon, Franck has already repeated the 3rd grade twice, which he experiences as a frustrating failure. His story is emblematic of the daily challenges faced by many individuals with disabilities and their families in Africa. Some decide to hide away, while others, like Franck, have chosen to fight. Our correspondent Maxime Faralbunia met with this 20-year-old and his family. Take a look.
This morning, Franck is in a bad mood. The 9th grade student has once again failed the BEPC, the Junior Secondary School Diploma. He is discouraged by this result as he had firmly believed in his chances of success until the very last minute. After seeking solutions by going to the relevant institutions for his problem and receiving promises for better consideration, he wonders if his concerns are truly heard and if his exam papers are even being properly graded.
It really hurts. In 3 years, I have not been able to obtain a diploma.
At birth, doctors diagnosed Franck with fetal distress, affecting his brain and causing motor and cognitive disorders. Since then, the lack of a precise diagnosis has led some to consider him autistic. One of the few institutions that took Franck in was Saint-Augustin High School, where he integrated well. However, his principal feels powerless in the face of administrative delays that hinder true inclusion. After initiating several administrative procedures between the ministry and various delegations and knocking on many doors, Franck's case is stalled. As a result, nothing is moving forward and the failures keep piling up.
The government, through the Ministry of Secondary Education, must take these cases into account to prevent school dropout, which is happening in families. At a certain point, children like this are not considered. There is a lack of inclusion in society, which leads to these children being somewhat abandoned and not having the same opportunities as others. It is a form of injustice.
In Cameroon, around 10% of the population lives with a disability. Their daily life is filled with obstacles, especially in education. Few disabled children are enrolled in school due to a lack of resources and suitable facilities. Teachers, often poorly trained, struggle to address the specific needs of these students. Unlike many others, Franck benefits from the support of people who accept him without discrimination, for whom his disability is not an obstacle to his activities.
He is a loving kid, someone who knows how to advise others, how to provide guidance, and who accepts everyone as they are. He doesn't discriminate against anyone, he doesn't focus on people's flaws, but only on their qualities and the good side of life. He truly has a joy for living.
He is a very funny person. And he also has mental strength, despite his failures. He always tries to move forward. In fact, he is a very sociable person.
Franck draws his strength from his family, especially from his father, who has always been his pillar. His father has taken it upon himself to compensate for the shortcomings of the educational system and to provide his son with the support he needs. Every day since his birth, he takes the time to talk with his son about his difficulties and his life.
Every evening, when I came home, I would spend at least 2 hours with him. It's a routine. I do my best to help him adapt to all the movements. I work with Franck every day, talking to him, doing exercises with him, showing him all the affection in the world, and making sure he knows that he is the best.
His family is not the only one that has pushed him to overcome his disability. Franck talks to us about a school called Sesame Creera, the primary school where he spent happy days and which promotes inclusive education, a refuge for the young man.
We do much more in the context of special education, but inclusive education aims to be all-encompassing. It relies on a triptych including Braille, sign language, and orthopedagogy.
Snake children, totems, sacrifice children, these are some of the labels assigned to them in our Cameroonian society, even though they did not choose to be born with such a disability and despite awareness-raising efforts.
You have your child, and you're in a supermarket, and you see a child with a particular need. If your child starts mocking them, that's an opportunity, for example, to say, no, he is a child just like any other. You don't need to mock him. These kids are going through real challenges. It is this kind of tolerance that we need to learn, and we need it.
The young teenager has not let prejudice and failure bring him down. On the contrary, he has no intention of giving up and continues to search for ways and means to pass his exams and eventually obtain his high school diploma to start his professional life. Like him, many young people hold on to the hope that one day things will change and that the laws adopted for children with disabilities will truly be implemented. They also hope that schools will adopt an inclusive system and that the state will ensure their future by guaranteeing an adapted education, training teachers, and improving access to exams.
Now it's time to introduce our guest, Sandra Senou, a mother of a disabled child. She has found a way of supporting families in similar situations who are often completely helpless, listening to them, providing material assistance, and also helping them to accept their child's disability is the mission she has set for herself with her aptly named association, Our Extra Capable Children, Nos Enfants Extra Capables. She has shared her priorities with Laurence Sustras and Thierry Schiller.
Sandra Senou, hello. Thank you for joining us on Initiative Africa.
Bonjour.
You've set up an association to help parents of disabled children, including yourself, the mother of a disabled child, Alexandre, who is now 13. What was your aim?
I am Sandra Senou, mother of 3 children, the eldest of 13 years old, Alexander. In 2022, I set up the Nos Enfants Extra Capables Association. It's an association that, as you say, supports the family of children with disabilities. Firstly, by helping them to accept their disability, but also by providing them with everything they need in terms of awareness, training, and equipment, whenever possible, for us to welcome and support children with disabilities. Why did I set up this association? As the parent of a disabled child, I realize that parents are often powerless when faced with their child's disability. It's true that in France, children are looked after, but parents are not always looked after. And it's even worse in Africa because children are not always looked after. They are not taken care of. Parents are at a loss and don't know what to do for their children. The first step is diagnosis, which is not always done. So if a child is found to be different, we don't know what's wrong. Parents are at a loss. So the aim of the association was really to provide parents with a place where they can be listened to, where they can be supported. Together, we can put in place actions to, above all, take charge of the child they have.
You talk about the great suffering of parents. How is this expressed and how can it be alleviated in concrete terms?
The suffering of parents often takes the form of loneliness. Parents find themselves alone and destitute in every way. Psychologically, because they are suffering, having a disabled child is not a trivial matter. When we have children, as I like to say, we have them because we imagine that our children will do this and that. But when the child arrives, and it's different from what we already thought, we have to mourn the loss of the normal child. Even then, it's a great deal of suffering for the parents. You have to accept that, and it's not always easy. Then you have to support the child. How do you support a child whose pattern you don't know? We have a classic scheme for supporting an ordinary child, a child with no disability. But for a child with a disability, there is no system in the world to support them. So again, parents isolate themselves because they don't know where to turn. They don't know what steps to take. They don't know how to educate this child. Of course, they'll do it instinctively, but there are no rules. As a result, parents are already suffering and isolated. But we also have the suffering caused by institutions that do not implement or provide the resources for families to support children with disabilities.
You've organized support groups in your association. Is the key, in the end, to talk?
It's not. It doesn't solve all the problems. You have to be prepared to talk. I remember when I found out about my child's disability. I didn't feel like talking. I was offered discussion groups, but I didn't feel like talking. I hadn't accepted my child's disability. What do I want to talk about? But once you've accepted, you need to talk. You need to express how you feel. And we don't dare tell everyone. You don't dare tell anyone because you think others don't understand what you're going through. But when you meet up with other parents going through a similar situation, you feel better understood and lighten the load you carry daily, those worries. What's my child going to be like tomorrow when I'm no longer here? What is he going to be like? How will I bring him up, do this or do that? Where I am going to send him to school? I can't do it at home. It's not suitable. And talking to other parents also helps us to find ways of improving our support for this child, but also to lighten up mental load because it is a mental load. So yes, talking doesn't solve everything, but talking is necessary.
Before setting up your association, you began writing books. Les Aventures d'Alexandre, Volume 1, Le Rêve d'Alexandre, Volume 2, and Alexandre, le Centre de Loisirs. You're now preparing a third volume. What is your aim with this book, which is both for children and parents?
The first objective was to remove the taboo surrounding disability. When Alexander was little, I read a lot of books to him and realized that there wasn't a book where there was a child with a disability. We talked about heroes who run, do this and do that. But I thought my son couldn't do that. It was frustrating. So I said to myself, well, maybe we'll write our first book with a little story that children can read before going to bed, but that also allows them to take ownership of their disability, to allow the children to see pictures of a child in a wheelchair if that's the case, which was the case of the first book for Alexander, in a wheelchair so that he could say, oh, okay, what's that? Talking about disability in the home allows parents to talk about it because we know that if we don't meet someone with a disability, disability or in a similar situation, we won't spontaneously talk about it. Book allows us to communicate and have other subjects to discuss, such as disability. The second book is for children aged 6 to 10. It's bilingual. It's a book that goes further. It talks about disability, but not just motor disability. It also talks about autism. The aim is really for children to understand that, okay, there's a disabled child in front of me. He's a different child. But in the end, he's just like us because he has the same emotions and desires. Even if they don't do things like we do, they can do them differently. So we will talk about adaptation, self-confidence, and accepting others. So the aim is really to raise awareness of these issues, to lift the taboo on disability, to raise awareness of harassment, to show that difference is not inevitable and that we can do things differently.
And podcasts serve the same purpose, to raise and make people more aware?
The podcast too, yes, but it was really to show, the podcast aimed to show the day-to-day life of a family of a child with a disability. How do they cope with this situation? What do they put in place? In the stories that we often hear in the podcast, the beginnings are usually shared. Still, we can see that in each story, each family and each parent has put something in place to support and accept their child's disability and go beyond the limits that disability can represent, to support this child towards what they are capable of doing despite the disability, towards a happy life, I like to say, because we often stigmatize the families of children with disabilities, saying that we're unhappy. I admit our daily lives are not easy, but that doesn't mean we're unhappy. We're happy. So podcasting is my thing. Okay, there's this situation, but we have a life and managed to get past it.
Are you seeking to boost your business in Africa and Europe? Increase your visibility with Business Frequency thanks to our network of national television channels in more than 40 countries. Every week, more than 100 broadcasts across Africa, the Indian Ocean and Europe. Don't miss this unique opportunity. Contact us now and put your brand into the spotlight.
Welcome back to the second part of our show. I will now take you to the Horn of Africa, specifically in Somalia. As you may know, this country struggles to emerge from political uncertainty and terrorist attacks, which often target civilians. However, in the capital Mogadishu, one man has decided to take an unprecedented initiative to change the lives of many vulnerable people. This man is Dr. Abdul Kadir Abdirahman Adan. He has established a free ambulance service to assist his fellow citizens caught in emergencies. This is a report from our correspondent Abdirahman Hussain. Take a look. Amin Ambulance is a free 24-hour medical emergency service based in Somalia's capital, Mogadishu. The service, which is run by a team of volunteers, responds to medical emergencies, particularly bomb attacks, to ferry victims to various medical facilities in Mogadishu for free. Moved by the deadly violence in Mogadishu at the onset of the militant group Al-Shabaab, Dr. Abdul Kadir Abdirahman Adan joined hands with friends to start the free ambulance service in response to the worsening medical emergencies in the city.
We started this service in 2006, and actually by the time it was in needed, many people was dying and getting injury inside the Bakara market or any other village in Mogadishu. So people was used to take a wheelbarrow from the scene to the hospital. Sometimes they died on the way. So I asked myself, how can I help myself? I and my team, we started this free ambulance service, and we call it Amin.
Abdul Qadir Abdullah Abdi, who has been a driver with Amin Ambulance for close to a decade now, says being on speed dial round the clock is no mean feat.
I joined it in 2013. We have been working under very difficult conditions, and we are on standby 24/7 for emergency cases, like people injured in bomb blast and mothers who give birth, and anyone in need of emergency support, like someone who gets high blood pressure at midnight in his home.
Unlike other ambulance services in the city, Amin Ambulance offers free services to its clients. The provider relies on contributions from well-wishers, including the business community, students, or individuals.
The ambulance service is funded by the Somali community and Somali businessmen. When we visit schools, companies, or universities, we ask the students to contribute $1. Every dollar saves a person.
Amin Ambulance is not only beneficial to members of the public, but also hospitals, which depend on the service during emergency situations. For Dr. Mustafa Yusuf of Mogadishu Medical and Imaging Academy, the free ambulance service plays a very crucial role.
Ambulances help us take emergency cases from their home to the hospital, such as expectant mothers, without charge. Also helps us transfer patients to other hospitals since they have well-trained personnel and they provide the necessary care during the transportation.
Fatima Noor is 5 months pregnant and blind. Unable to raise taxi fare nor walk the distance, she called Amin Ambulance, which responded promptly. I came to a public health center in Hodan district, Mogadishu, for checkups, and the doctor sent me for ultrasound checkups. I called Amin Ambulance to carry me since I could not walk to the hospital because I'm blind and was 5 months pregnant. They carried me for free. I thank them. But in a city where vested interest runs deep, operating a free service is bound to run into a host of challenges. Dr. Abdul Qadir, however, flags security as one of the main challenges facing his team.
In my experience in working in 15 years in a free ambulance service in Somalia, the main challenges that we are facing from the day we started till now, it is security challenge. The financial challenge there is also, but if there is no finance or if there is no income, at least we can run it. Whether we pay from our own pocket or we take from the businessman or any other person. But for security, it is something which we cannot play with it.
Mogadishu still faces violence regularly, and the health service providers such as Amin Ambulance go a long way in relieving this wounded city of its daily assaults. Rejection, inadequate infrastructure and feelings of shame. In many African countries, parents of children with disabilities face numerous challenges. To support families and local organizations, our guest, Sandra Senou, tailors her strategies to meet the continent's specific needs. She shares more in the second part of her interview. Let's listen to her.
Let's discuss your activities in Africa. Your association is present in at least 7 countries. How does that work?
So, we operate through local channels. Since I am not on site, I often rely on local associations that are already carrying out initiatives. My role is to come in alongside the association as a complement. We will bring awareness and training because I have trained to be a project manager of disability and inclusion. This allows us to raise awareness but also to train professionals, families, etc. on issues related to disability. So the goal is really to provide a local complement alongside the association.
And what specific issues have you noted about the problems faced by African parents of children with disabilities?
Rejection. There is a lack of infrastructure and facilities to send children to school and care for them, and there is a shame for those around them. I was recently in Côte d'Ivoire and the shame really struck me. Society's rejection of children with disabilities who are called children who are dead, children who don't deserve to live, or whatever you want to call them. And it is still a big taboo in Africa.
It's very hard.
It is very, very violent. It is very violent because children are often told, listen, he doesn't deserve to live. We'll leave him somewhere. He's going to die because he doesn't deserve to live. Or if the mother is a shopkeeper, no one will buy from her. For them, children bring bad luck. And you can't buy from the mother of a child who brings bad luck. The family often rejects her. Husbands abandon their wives because, well, no, she's bad luck. It's very, very violent. Parents experience deep pain and loneliness due to insufficient support from public institutions.
Does this mean you have to change your work and the form of support you provide to local associations?
Often, yes, because we adapt. And when I go on site, it allows me to say, okay, we're going to work on this specific issue because it's the most commonly encountered. For example, when we talk about rejection, it involves working with the parents and psychologists, not just me, but also other trained professionals, to help them understand that they are not responsible for their child's disability. Yes, your child is capable of doing something if you support them, if you give them love. So we slightly adjust the support we offer to the people on site to help them better cope with their child's disability.
What about the responsiveness of public authorities in Africa, since one of the keys is education, access to education?
Oh, it's still difficult. There are some countries that are on board, but right now it makes me a little sad to realize how little attention public authorities are giving to this issue. Yes, it's on paper, but in practice, not always, not always. There's still a lot to be done, just adapting the infrastructure, just enabling children to go to school. How can parents who don't have the means afford to send their children to a private school or to get rehabilitation? Children often need rehabilitation several times a week, and it's expensive. Are they going to pay for it if they don't have the means? So there needs to be support for these parents. There needs to be guidance for these parents so that children can be properly cared for. And for now, there is still extremely little being done.
What would you recommend in concrete terms? Adapted infrastructure for certain schools, specialized schools, school life assistance, or jobs that don't yet exist in Africa?
In some African countries, inclusive schools are being tested, or rather, inclusive classes are being tested. It could start there. This avoids the need to build an entire structure, but it does require training staff and adapting the facilities. However, it also allows children to be in school with other children, to be educated. However, not all types of disabilities can be addressed, and not every child can be enrolled in a regular school. There is also a need to build specialized facilities to accommodate children with disabilities, where they will have the necessary staff and supervision to relieve families and give these children a future.
Sandra, Senou, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Well, that's it. Initiative Africa is over for today. You can find Sandra Senou's interview and our program on our website, africaonair.com. Follow us on our social media channels and feel free to share, like, and comment with the hashtag Initiative Africa. And remember to tune in next week, same time, same channel, for a new episode of Business Africa. Have a great week, and until next time, goodbye.